Welcome to Listen, Learn, Champion. My name's Natasha.
And I'm Madison.
We're so glad you're here. We're going to do a part 2 of last week. Last week we were in Luke and we talked about Mary and Zachariah, and I thought it was super good. We got some good feedback, which is going to create some changes around here.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite episodes to record.
Yeah.
And then watching back, it felt just the flow was so nice.
Yeah.
It felt so relatable, and I really, really liked it.
Yeah.
A lot.
So if you are a young adult, if you're a mom, if you're a girl in general, put down in the comments something that you want to hear us talk about. If there's something on your heart, something you're struggling with, something you don't understand in the Bible, let us know in the comments and we're going to talk about it. We want it to be for you guys. It's not about us. We've said that from the beginning. And it's for you. We want to make your life something that's going to just help you champion every second. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
You ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. No dad joke today. Sorry, guys. So we're in Luke. We're going to go into Luke 2. So last week we're in Luke chapter 1, and now we're kind of going into chapter 2. My laptop died again because my fiance had to watch football with my computer. So we're with paper again. Sorry, guys.
Back to the basics.
Back to the basics. So sorry about it. But in chapter 2, you see that Joseph has to go to Bethlehem. And why? Why would you all of a sudden have to go to another city when your wife is pregnant and about to pop? I would be mad. I'd be like, I'm not doing that. I ain't getting on no donkey. But so Caesar decreed a census that everyone had to go back to their hometown. And so that being said, Joseph's hometown was Bethlehem. So they had to go on this journey, and it was by foot. There was no airplanes. There was no cars.
No trains, no Ubers.
No, kind of sucks. You have to get on a donkey with your sandals. No, thank you. Yep. But I'm all about numbers when I read my Bible. And so when I read this, I was like, well, how long could that have possibly taken? So many different scholars believe different things, but some people think that it was a 5-day journey, and it was called the Nativity Trail. There's a movie called The Nativity. It's about the story of Jesus and the birth, and you should watch it. It's super good. But so the number 5 symbolizes grace, God's goodness, and his favor towards people. Sorry, guys. And I just think that's so beautiful that 5 represents something so intimate that, God favors us and he wants to see us succeed no matter what the journey may look like. And so if you kind of want to break it down, last week we talked about a vertical relationship and a horizontal relationship. And so you have the 10 commandments, and the first 5 commandments are your relationship with God, and the second 5 is your relationship with people. And it's just so cool how God thought out, how you first have to have your relationship with the Lord, and then you can have your relationship with people. But you have a journey in life, whether it's college, whether it's post-grad, whether you're a new mom or you have a screaming toddler. How do you know that God's calling you to this different journey of life, whether it was your plan, your parents' plan, a plan that you thought you wanted so bad? How do you know that you're supposed to take that step?
I don't think it's always as obvious as we would want it to be.
Yeah.
And I think knowing that it isn't always the obvious answer. What we say a lot is, okay, is it kingdom building? Mm-hmm. I was talking about this with some friends last night, and assuming responsibility for actions that you have done or actions that you have made or plans that you have for yourself that just propel towards following through with something that you started.
Yeah.
If it's kingdom building, the Lord comes beside you and helps you take the next steps to glorify his kingdom through those hopes and dreams that are in your heart.
And it takes discernment. You really have to know your relationship with Christ first and foremost before you can start making different decisions. And sometimes I've always in my personal experience, when something has changed in my life, I made a huge decision to not go to grad school and do something else. And now that career change I've made. I still want to go to grad school, but I'm going to make the job I have pay for it because I ain't going to pay for it.
Yeah.
But that was a really hard decision, and it rocked the world that I thought I had and what I needed to have. And I really struggled with that for a really long time. And I had to accept that, hey, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what the outcome is going to look like. I'm not sure what my 5-year plan looks like, because I knew my plan from before I started college to when I was done with college. And I just really had to be like, okay, Lord, like, I know that you have my best interest at heart, and I just took it for the roller coaster as it is. And it's still hard to say, like, I made this change because I just felt like the Lord's calling me. Nobody's going to understand what the Lord is telling you but you, because it's not their life. So it's hard for them to be like, well, how do you know the Lord's telling you to do that? You just know, because it's your intimate relationship with the Lord.
Yeah. And since we're on the topic of college, that was a huge deciding factor in my life. I remember being a senior in high school and youth group and applying to all of these universities. And I applied to some in Florida, but I applied to a lot that were not in Florida because, high school in Madison was ready to get out and go somewhere else and try something new.
Yeah.
And I didn't get into any that I applied to in Florida. So I was thinking, well, either I should have performed a little bit better, or this is the Lord telling me that I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
Still unsure. I'm kidding. It was definitely the Lord pointing me to a direction, but it came down to schools, and I was blessed to be in that position to be able to have the choice. And it was really, really hard for me. And I just remember praying one night, and people thought I was crazy when I talked about this. The Lord does give you visions, and the Lord does plant different desires in your heart. And sometimes you might not get the answer that you're looking for, but sometimes you will. And I remember just praying and praying and praying and praying and saying, Lord, you open this door for me. Which one do I go through?
Yeah.
I have 2 great opportunities right in front of me. How do I decide?
Yeah.
I want you to be the deciding factor, not myself.
So what were the schools that you had to decide between?
It was Alabama and Georgia.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. It was Alabama and Georgia. And
wow.
I remember in youth, we had these nights called fire nights, and it was just nights of worship and prayer.
Yeah.
And for some reason, just with my upbringing, I wasn't accustomed to getting on my knees and praying. I remember this so vividly as one of the very first times I got down on my knees and I was praying. And it was almost a vision of these 2 schools' logos. You might think I'm crazy, but I swear that this is what happened when you ask the Lord to give you a vision.
No, yeah.
And he made it so plain and simple, and they just spun around and spun around and spun around and spun around. And all of a sudden the Georgia G just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the other one started fading out and fading out and fading out. And still, kind of like what we were talking about last week with Zechariah, I said, but are you sure?
I mean, how? Why could you not question? Just kidding.
But it happens.
Yeah.
It happens. The Lord can put it right in front of your face when you're praying for something, and you can still look at him and say, okay, but did I make that up, or is that you?
Yeah.
I ended up going to Georgia, and it was 100% his will.
Yeah.
And that was just evident throughout my whole entire college experience. But it's just so funny because your doubt can still get in the way of what the Lord is trying to show you.
Yeah.
To do.
There's a story in the Bible. I forget where it is. I think we briefly touched on it in another episode, but the man, I forget his name. It's on the tip of my tongue, but he basically is praying to God, like, God, if this is you, make the rug dry and the ground underneath wet. And that's what happened. And then, he was like, can you reverse it? Make the rug wet, but the ground completely dry. And he did it. And so it just shows that, you can have a conversation with God and be like, God, is this really you telling me to do this? He doesn't want you to not come to him with doubts, but don't doubt his abilities. It's almost like, God, are you sure this is you showing up for me? Or am I misinterpreting something? And just asking him for clarification. I just love that story because he asks God for clarification to make sure that it's God, because there's so many things that are distracting us and almost saying like, it's not God, like it's just you, so asking for that clarification is super helpful and super awesome.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of shame in doubt. And it's something that we don't talk about
Yeah.
that much on a day-to-day basis, but I have my doubts sometimes in knowing if it's God or if it's me or if it's something that I've been groomed to hear my whole life because of my mindset. So it's a hard concept sometimes to wrap your head around. So don't think that we're just giving you all these tips and okay, good, I'll never doubt the Lord again. You know, it's
so this Sunday, Madison and I were in kids this week, and kids are kids, you know. They want to tell you everything, even if it's the same story 5 times.
Many bee and wasp sting stories. And you know, our favorite thing about kids is they say, and
they're just so excited to tell you about this bee. But anyways, I just remember we were talking about bullying and different, like, you know, and we had a kid. She was like, hey, I have a question. And we were like, yeah. And she's like, how do you know that, you know, Jesus is real?
Yeah.
And Madison gave an amazing answer, and it was just so very basic. It's just faith. It's childlike faith. You just have to believe, and believing isn't seeing. And, you know, you can read the Bible and there's so many miracles and there's so many things that are very visual. And it's like, well, why isn't he doing it now? Why aren't we seeing the miracles now? And I'm not saying that we're not seeing miracles, and maybe we're just not looking for them anymore. But, you know, if you come across somebody, I just remember I said this to her. I was like, you just have to explain maybe how you know Jesus is real. You know, Mary conceived a child. Gabriel, the angel, blessed her of that. And she went on to have a child that was not Joseph's. Okay. Hot topic. It wasn't Joseph's baby. Okay. They were married. But, you know, Jesus walked this earth and he lived a life from being a child to an adult. And it's in the Bible, it's childlike faith, like Madison said, but sometimes you have to give such a simple answer to even adults. And it's hard, you know, maybe you're 10 years into your faith or you're just starting out. You always have to go to the root of, sometimes it's just faith.
Yeah.
It's nothing. It's not the glitz. It's not the glam. It's not a fancy, like, I don't know. It's just faith.
I think about how amazing it is every single time. It makes, I'm an emotional person to begin with. So if you ever see tears fill my eyes, I'm okay. It's just normal for me. But I think about that childlike wonder, and I think about that childlike faith. It really makes me emotional because I think that's something that no matter how many years you've been a follower and how many years you have worshiped Jesus, don't lose that. Yeah. Because that's what redirects your mind from looking for those miracles. You know he's done
Super
it.
Good.
It doesn't become mundane. Yeah. God is the same as he is yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Yeah. Those miracles he was performing that we read about in our Bible. I was just talking about this with my family yesterday. You can read that book over and over and over again, and you might think you know it like the back of your hand. But the Lord, he reveals different things to you every single time you read it.
That's really good.
So you should crave that childlike wonder and the innocence of your knowledge, and not think that you're ever at a point that I know enough. Yeah. Every time I'm reading through Matthew right now, and I am getting revelations left and right, and I feel like a child are learning about this for the first time, and it's the sweetest experience ever.
So something I want to say to that is, if you feel like you're kind of like, well, I know everything in the Bible. Okay, so let's do self-reflection. Open up one of your old church notes, read through what you wrote, read through those different verses, and I would probably bet money that verse doesn't hit you the same as it did when you first read it, and where you first wrote about it.
And on the other hand, something I was talking about with someone yesterday is they're new to their faith. And they said, I feel like I'm called to be a light, but I'm surrounded by people who do not believe what I believe in. Yeah. And they said, how do I not make the argument, because no one's going to come to Jesus over an argument. I feel very strongly about that. Yeah. But being firm in what you do know. You might not know the Bible the best. You might not have, because if you're so fresh in it, it takes time to
Yeah.
read and study the Bible. But you can be firm in how he lives in you and the changes that he has made in you and in your life, and what contributed to your decision to become a follower of Christ. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to know the Bible like the back of your hand. I don't. I'm still studying and working on it and trying to know it better. And I think that's so important on both ends of the spectrum, that if you're so fresh and new, don't feel that you can't validate how you feel the Lord has touched you in your own life because you don't have the biblical wisdom to back it up.
Yeah.
You know your God, you know Jesus, and you know your truth, and you're on a journey like all of us. So don't beat yourself up if you don't know if you don't know something in the Bible to be able to give your backup to whatever you're trying to prove. So
and going off that, like if you are a new believer, sometimes your friends might challenge you and be like, well, throw stuff in your face, or like, why are you doing that? It's not fun. Like, just again, knowing your truth and knowing that God's calling you to something else, and that's how you want to live your life, and you just keep showing up for yourself because it's not about them.
So I found the verse that I was looking for because I did want to say it correctly, because I was reading through it yesterday, and it's in Matthew 5, and it's in the Beatitudes, and it's Matthew 5:11, and it says, "Blessed are you when the people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." You're going to be rewarded for continuing to share the good news of God. And I think that's just so important to remember. And you're going to go through hardships. You're going to be questioned. You're going to be, persecuted, as it says in the Bible, but your rewards are being stored up in heaven for you.
Yeah. And just remember, you have work to do here, whatever that looks like for you. I think we're going to end with a challenge to you guys of just saying, whatever your journey is in life, whether you just started or you're 10 years in, your purpose may change and, your goals may change. But as long as it's kingdom building, just keep going, keep doing the work, keep showing up for you and your relationship with the Lord, because that's ultimately the center of your life and what's the most important.
Yeah.
And we'll see y'all next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for hanging out.